Hello, everyone. My name is Brennan Meyer. That noise you're hearing is my ventilator. Welcome to another episode of the Acolyte Analysis, presented by Page Turners They Were Not, my Star Wars podcast. All right, folks, we just got another really interesting episode of the Acolyte, episode 6, called Teach/Corrupt. Now, it's an interesting title because it sort of asks the question, what is the line between teaching and corrupting? And I think this episode explore those ideas. So I'm not going to break down every scene here, but I would like to talk about the moments or the ideas or the themes that really stood out to me in this episode. The first thing I wanted to mention is that we now know that there are some external enemies of the Jedi in the political sphere. Master Renestra is talking to a senator that says there's another senator. There's a senator who's apparently got some support, is not a friend of the Jedi, and wants an external review of the Jedi, I guess. And this might be one of the reasons why Vernestra is reluctant to tell the council what's going on, like she said in the last episode. Or 2 episodes ago, her fear was that if the Jedi Council is informed of what's going on with these murders, with May, with Chimere, that the the information might get to the Senate, which would then allow the Jedi's political enemies to have basically reason to be even more angry with the Jedi. But clearly, with this one senator's external review, or at least that's what he wants, it would suggest that the Jedi have done a few things to gain political enemies. I'd be interested to know what they did that has caused some people to turn against them. Could it have to do with what's going on in the High Republic novels? I don't know. Well, we'll have to see, but it's an interesting idea. You know, Vernestra has become somewhat of a politician. And I don't mean that she's active in politics. I mean that she's learned how to play the political game. And her focus is on those things. We get Chimere with May. Sorry, Chimere with Osha. And now we're on a planet which is titled Unknown Planet. I think it's Octo. I think it's where Luke was hanging out 160 years later. I think it's the site of like the first Jedi Temple. Now, I don't know if it's the same island, but I think it's the same planet. You know, Luke mentions that the reason he went to Octo, well, not the reason he went, but he says that there's a balance on Octo between powerful light and powerful dark. There is the forced light side tree on Octo. On the island that Luke is on, there is also dark side cave. So the idea that the world has light side areas and dark side areas, and Chimere has turned his little cave into a dark side area. We also see that there is a vein of cortosis, which is what his helmet is made out of, which shorts out lightsabers, as we saw last week. That's an interesting little detail. So we get Osha, who is kind of Chimere's prisoner. Chimere gives her the opportunity to leave, but she doesn't. Now, I don't know why he would give her the opportunity to leave. I imagine that maybe he would kill her before she actually leaves. But he seems to be, at least on the surface, okay with her leaving. And we get some very interesting moments where we have to talk about the seduction of the dark side. And in this particular episode, I think the metaphor is quite clear, because not only is Osha being tempted by the dark side, but she's also being tempted in a carnal way, a lustful way, by Chimere himself. Which I think is why the bathing scene is so important, because we're getting the sense that she's being seduced in multiple ways, and a lot of that is the passion of the dark side. The idea that the dark side is about carnal, lustful, animalistic things. This is kind of what she's being tempted by. And she's being affected by it, because she has the opportunity on multiple occasions to kill Chimere, but she doesn't. Even after everything is done, killing Yord, killing Jeki. These are people who meant a lot to Osha. And you'd think that she would be more full of rage. But she's being drawn in by his seduction. It's an interesting metaphor or parallel between being seduced by Chimere himself and also being seduced by the dark side. And the pull of it is very strong. And Osha has the opportunity to kill Chimere. And she is full of rage and anger. And Chimere's like, good, use it. And really drawing out of her the fact that she didn't make the cut as a Jedi. At least in Osha's mind, she says, because I failed. We don't know what that failure means, but I imagine that the difficulty for her was letting go of her more emotional side. She was in mourning after the quote-unquote loss of her sister. and the loss of our people, and it would seem that emotionally she may have never been able to live up to what the Jedi are trying to create in the Jedi. That she was too emotional, almost. We don't know exactly what she means by saying I failed, but I would assume that she just could not really let go of her emotions. Kynier senses that, and Kynier basically tells her, you don't need to follow all those rules. Yeah, he's kind of offering that sense that often happens to people is to say, hey, you don't need those rules. You don't need those. You're like, you don't need society to tell you how to be. You can just be who you want to be. Or sometimes the lie is become who you were meant to be. I'm basically saying you don't need to follow all those rules. Come to our side and you can be free. And we've heard Palpatine use similar language with Anakin. Saying, don't continue to be a pawn in the Jedi Council. Or these ideas of, use your feelings. So the dark side often uses that lure of come over here and you can be free. And the slippery slope to evil, I think, is thinking that you can be more free by turning away from the light. When I think personally that the more you turn to the light, the more free you are. But the dark side would have you believe otherwise. And Osha seems to be rather drawn in by Kynier's ideas. Now, at the end of the episode, Kynier offers her the opportunity to put on his helmet. It's a sensory deprivation mask, kind of like we saw Luke and Sabine wear in other Star Wars stories. Is that it sort of shuts out all your senses. And Kynier says it's you and the Force and whatever you bring with you. It's taking the Jedi training idea of your eyes can deceive you, don't trust them. The idea of Luke practicing with the helmet. But this is the dark side inversion of that same idea. But I imagine that what Osha is going to see in that helmet that whatever she's taking in there with her will be there. Is the helmet inherently evil? Is there some evil contained within? Or does it only amplify what the person wearing it feels? That it's full of darkness because Kynier is full of darkness. Maybe if Osha puts it on because she's not as full as darkness, she'll see something different. But my biggest question is because Chimera has been wearing it for a while, is Osha going to see Chimera's backstory? Because his Force imprint is on the helmet. We've seen that in some Star Wars stories. Darksiders, particularly, being able to infuse physical objects with their essence. So we'll see. We'll see what we see, and we'll see that Chimera sounds like he might have an interesting backstory. The last thing I want to say about Chimera is when we see him without his shirt, he has a nasty scar up his back. Now, Chimera claims that he was a Jedi. And the implication, even though he never answered the question directly, is that he was thrown out and that his master left that scar on him. Now, the name Chimera would suggest, like Chimera, the idea that Chimera is somewhat untrustworthy because he is chimerical, or a chimera being a multifaceted creature. So I don't really know whether we can believe Chimera on this. But if he was a Jedi, and that wound was given to him by his master, we see Master Vernestra, without, for lack of a better word, pull out her light whip, which is her lightsaber, that she can also set it to act like a whip. Was Vernestra Chimera's master? Now, Vernestra is investigating what's going on Koflar. When Sol sends a message saying that my team was slaughtered, Vernestra leads an investigation team, and we don't really know what Vernestra's up to here. Her Padawan wonders if Sol killed all these people. I don't think Vernestra would pin it on Sol. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. But there seems to be an implication that Vernestra knows what's going on here. Almost as if she senses, if she can sense it through the Force, but senses that she knows the killer. If she is indeed Chimera's former master, is she going to try to cover up what happened? Or is she going to accept that that's her responsibility and that she needs to deal with this and deal with Chimera? This is not going to be the last season of the show as far as we know. So they don't need to wrap everything up in the next 2 episodes. Where is Vernestra going to go with this? That's my biggest question. He seems to take offense at her Padawan saying, oh, Sol could have done this. But is Vernestra going to go so far as to blame it on Sol? So that this senator doesn't have any ammo with which to accuse the Jedi of being ineffective. Because if his external review, or if this political pressure were to reveal that there was a Darksider that the Jedi tried to cover up, that would not look good for the Jedi. If Vernestra were to say, oh, one of our guys turned to the dark side, It's all good. It's all taken care of. Case closed. Then that would sort of tie a bow on it, and the galaxy at large would never know what happened. Would Vernestra go so far as to blame Sol? Has she fallen that far? Now, we meet Vernestra in the High Republic novels, and she's very different then than she is in the Acolyte. But the novels take place 100 years before the Acolyte. And Vernestra is a young woman, a young woman, a young Jedi, experiences some pretty awful things. So I think I can understand a little bit of how she got to where she is. It's kind of like Luke. People change over time based on their experiences. I don't think Vernestra will try to blame it on Soul, but I don't really know what she's planning, but I imagine that she senses that there's a connection here. And if it is Chimera that was her student, I think she might sense on a personal level what's going on here. The other thing I wanted to say was the story with May and Soul. Now, the question might come up of why didn't May just try to kill Soul at any given moment? And maybe the answer is she wanted his ship. Maybe she was afraid of getting back to her own ship because the Chimera would follow her. So maybe she wanted to get on the Jedi ship and then kill Soul. And then just take off in whatever direction. And it seems that our good buddy Basil knows what's going on here. That is not Osha, but that is May. Now he brings the droid, whose name escapes me, Pip, with him. And Pip is also aware that this is not Osha. Now, as to why Basil didn't run up to Soul, tug on his sleeve, point at May, and be like, hey, you got the wrong person here. I don't know exactly why he didn't. And it's a good question. It really is. And why does he take the trouble to plug Pip back in? I'm not exactly sure what that's all about. But regardless, it seems that Soul is convinced that that is May. Sorry, that is Osha. But as he says to Osha, or he says to May, sorry, I'm getting so mixed up here. He expresses to May his regret that he did not sense that Pioneer was the stranger. He was not able to sense that Chimera was evil, and he feels kind of bad about it. And May says, sometimes we see what we want. We're so focused it could cloud our judgment. And I think that at the time, Soul's focus was on giving May that he didn't really sense that Chimera was evil. And this time around, because his focus is on so many other things, it's understandable why he didn't recognize that that was May. The idea that our judgment can be clouded by our emotions I mean, how often is that true? That's very true in real life. And it's very true in Star Wars. And also, the dark side has an ability to cloud people's judgment as well. Now, as most fans are, I too am impatient. I am not applying the Jedi teachings because I want the answers. I want to know the story that Soul isn't telling us. And it looks like we'll get that next week, but we just have to exercise patience this week. He eventually figures out that that's May. And it almost seems the last scene that Soul is almost a little bit scary. And I don't know if that means he's secretly been evil the whole time. I don't think so. But it does feel like he's been definitely pushed to his limit and is maybe getting a little too close to dark side emotions. But I'm interested to hear his story. And yes, the questions as to why Basil did this or why Pip did that. Those are legitimate questions, and I don't know the answer. Now, I do think one last thing is we see May reset Pip. That's a good metaphor for what's going on in this episode because I think both May and Osha are being reset by what they're experiencing. Pip being reset kind of defectory settings and needing to start over is what's happening with May and with Osha. And I imagine that they may end up flipping places. Osha might go dark and May might go light. I don't know. But basically, their world is being undone and they're needing to start over. And that's what I think why they spent a few minutes on Pip being reset. Um, there's so many other things to talk about here. But those are the things that really stood out to me in this episode. I apologize if my thoughts have been kind of all over the place. But there's a lot to think about here. Now, I don't think this episode is as good as last week. This and episode 4 might be my least favorite so far. Still enjoy it, but I'm getting very impatient to get to the answers. As they say, good things come to those who wait. And I don't know where we're going here, but I'm excited for the ride. My name is Brendan Moore. That noise you're hearing is my ventilator. Thank you for tuning in for another Acolyte analysis presented by Page Turners. They Were Not My Star Wars podcast. For light and life, and may the Force be with you.